Come, spell weavers, reavers, rogues, and men-at-arms, and answer the call of adventure. Pick up your sword, your axe, your spellbook, your bow, your rulebook, and your dice, and join the forces of good in their eternal fight against vile monsters, conspiring min-maxers, horny bards, and blood-soaked murder hobos. Discover the treasure trove of role-playing games here on Rollin Bones. My name is Ryan Howard, and I shall be your guide. Good evening, Boneheads, and welcome back to Rollin' Bones with Ryan Howard, your RPG treasure trove where we are making old school young again. I'm your host and king of the Boneheads, Ryan Howard, and joining me this evening is someone who you all should know and love already. You have seen him on Table Breakers, you've seen him on Gatekeepers, you've seen him on Legion of Myth. He is the one and only Conall, the Cigar DM. So Conall, welcome to Rollin' Bones.
Thank you for having me. We've been talking about doing this for a little bit. I'm glad it finally came to happen.
Absolutely. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. The RPG world is on fire right now. And on top of that, I, of course, want to talk about your area of expertise, which is professional game mastering. And, I just generally want to have a conversation with you because you always have cool things to say on the shows that you're on. So
That's questionable, but I'll take the compliment. Being a paid DM is fun, or should I say GM, as you know, down the road, it very well could be a GM's point of view, so I have a DM's point of view, with the what's going on with the Wizards of the Coast. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how that's going to hammer it out in the short term. Long term, it's going to be painful for everybody. I do not see a clear path for anybody that wants to stay in the hobby without getting a headache.
right. Yeah, there's all kinds of implications of all this new OGL 1.1 stuff, and we'll talk about as much of it as we can tonight. So I just want to start at the beginning, though, and start us off here with the introductory questions that we do every time someone's on the show for the first time. So, Conall, how did you get into role-playing games?
I was a late bloomer, really late. I most of the people you talk to will have the high school story they were picked on, or for one reason or the other, they got started in high school with a group of friends. I was in sports. I boxed for a period of time, and I played rugby for a period of time. It wasn't until after college, when I was taking my middle brother up to our community college, that I saw a group of guys throwing, just goofing around and, throwing these plastic weird little things. I went over to see what was up because naturally curious guy. Next thing I know, I have, and it's 3.5 era. I have a tiefling fighter rogue in front of me, and I don't know my ass from the hole in the ground, but I'm making it work. I'm learning the ropes as fast as I can, and 3.5 is a rough system to just be thrown into, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, as much as people like to bag on, builds and people who have spreadsheets just full of, if I add this and this and this to, make this character, as much as people like to make fun of that in kind of the OSR world that I find myself in something like 3.5, that is a necessity.
Oh, and it bounced right over to the Pathfinder, which most of my friends will call Mathfinder because it was just doing more of the crunching numbers, which I'm fine with. See, I don't know about you, but I think my teacher lied to me because they told me growing up I'd never walk around with a calculator in my pocket. Apparently, that's a horrible lie. It doesn't only no. How should I put this? It doesn't only do the numbers; it will tell me what it is just by saying, "Hey Siri." And before she gets started, the answer is no.
Not only do we walk around with a calculator, but you can get a graphing calculator application on the
Yeah.
spawn. So you're walking around with a Texas Instrument and then some, as far as this little device here goes.
I mean, granted, this is a tad bit cheaper than the $75 that you had to pay for one of the Texan calculator college grade ones.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it slices, it dices, it does your math for you, whatever.
Absolutely. Now, of all of the time that you've spent gaming, if you had to pick a fondest RPG memory, what would that be?
This is one of those completely not bullshit because Jade from Table Breakers and Gatekeepers can back me up type of stories. We're dealing with I think, young or middle-aged Red Dragon.
Mhm.
And we have to go in there to get this tome for one reason or the other. Keep this in mind. This is a better part of almost 20 years ago. So if I'm a little spotty on the story, I'm sorry. But I'm playing that Tiefling Rogue I told you about,
Mhm.
and I told that dragon this wand, as I pulled out one of summoning nature's ally, will lead you to a horde that's greater than yours. I will trade you this for that. Complete bluff. I knew exactly what was in my hand. I rolled a nat 20. The poor schmuck of a DM rolled a nat 1.
Mhm.
And between the level, the skill points, I was like in the high 40s, and he still rolled a nat 1.
Mhm.
So he took the wand, he flew off. We had, sorry, we had I do people call me when I don't want you to. We got the Dragon's Horde, we got what we wanted, and we booked ass out.
Mhm. Oh
So that's
man,
been fun, this one.
Crafty is already firing shots across the bow, saying that Connell's fondest RPG memory is when he got schooled by yours truly.
I don't want to know if those are the most fondest, but they are the most memorable. Geesh, teach me from talking about 5e. I
That
mean,
was
old school 5e, if that is a thing.
Mhm. That was one of those. You could almost hear Jim Ross screaming in the background. By God, it's Crafty Matt. He's got a steel chair.
Oh, there's blood on the mat. He's wearing the crimson mask. Yeah, yeah. Uh, Style DMing. I don't care if you're a home table DM or you work at a shop. Everybody runs their game differently. Yes, Crafty was absolutely right with what he said.
Mhm.
People should read the dungeon manual, and I will never argue against that because, well, I just know better.
Mhm.
But I don't know. The way I run my tables is not going to be the same way you run your tables, and so forth and so on. And the argument was not so much argument, but the conversation was about milestones versus XP.
Mhm.
I find it from a professional point of view, it's just a whole lot easier to just do to do milestones. Just
Yeah.
tell them, hey, this is where you guys are at. This is level you need to be at the level. We'll get there when we get there,
Mhm. Yeah, and
and it moves smoother.
I mean, just kind of going back to my early days of gaming, I was taught milestones wrong based on what Crafty read out of the DMG on what milestones actually are, according to that book. The way that my GM, who kind of taught me how to play and taught me how to run the game, did milestones, and the way that I did milestones up until actually like reading the DMG, that's how I interpreted them too. So, according to the letter of the law, every fifth edition game that I ran uh, was done wrong in that way. So,
I run Pathfinder Rise of the Rune Lord through the 5e engine,
mhm.
which has its own little fun hiccups. Sometimes the monster in Pathfinder doesn't translate completely over to 5th edition. And it is what it is. I'll just reskin something else to make it as close as possible.
Mhm.
Let's put some little bit of imagination back into role playing. But once they get to a certain point, even the book I have, which is the anniversary edition of Rise of the Lord, just say they should be this level at this point. So once they get to that point, I just pull the trigger. Guess what? Everybody just leveled, and it just makes my life easier for the most part. I don't, easy is not always good, but when you're dealing with people that doesn't always have the best attention span, including the DM, it's sometimes the easier way to go.
Now, I'm going to ask you a question that's going to be a little off the wall, and maybe something that you're not expecting on the show tonight. But in addition to being a professional GM and a regular contributor to several streams in this RPG world of ours, you're also a culinary professional.
I would use the term professional loosely, but yes, I cook for a living.
Gotcha. I have found, as someone who likes to cook, I don't do it professionally, but I love doing it as a hobby and to feed myself. But as someone who likes to cook, I've noticed that there are a lot of similarities between being a game master and cooking, in that you're assembling ingredients. Sometimes you're using a recipe straight up or a module straight up. Sometimes you're pulling from different experiences, but it's equal parts creativity, science, and showmanship in a lot of ways. And you're also beholden to an audience who, yes, you've pulled something together here, and maybe to your palate or in your mind, this is something that's going to taste good and be enjoyed by the group that you've assembled to consume it, but you won't know until you actually give it to them and see how they experience it.
I see where you're going. The best example I have from culinary arts point of view, it's like doing Thanksgiving dinner.
Mm-hmm.
The first half of getting your table together via cooking or telling a story is prep work. Do I have the maps drawn out? Do I have the villains or whatever, town folk, NPC, all the nuts and bolts figured out? Then you start moving into your vegetables. Now, what is everybody going to be playing? How does this work with the story? Then you get into the meat of it, which is telling the story itself. I mean, most tables around Thanksgiving vary from, single couple to 12 people, if not more. So treating it, using it from your point of view, from what you're going with, yeah, I can see how the two are very close together, because when the meal comes together, it's all laid out. You won't hear any complaints until after the meal is done, if there is any to hear to begin with. And except for a few, hey, this turkey's kind of dry, rule ordering, you normally don't get much of it during the meal.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, and I smoked my turkey this year, so turkey being dry wasn't so much of a problem.
If you don't want a pretty turkey, but you want it the breast not to dry out, cook the bastard upside down. Mm-hmm. And the breast stays, that does not dry out. But it makes for an ugly turkey, but it's to eat, not to look at, right? So.
Now, here's another oddball question for you, and you might not even have an answer for this because a lot of your gaming is done in a game shop, running games professionally. But what cigar do you think pairs best with GMing?
Wow. I That's a good question. Depends on what kind of game you're playing. What kind of story you're telling. I personally, when I get to game at somebody's house and I'm allowed to smoke in the basement if we're out in the garage, I prefer a longer stick, a thick, longer stick, because while you're sitting around for other people's times, it gives you something to do. You can think about stuff and working on your breathing exercise. So I say to my ex-wife, I think what prepares well with a good game is very much is what the story is going to. I mean, I don't know if you saw last week's Gatekeepers, not last week's, but the weeks before that, when we're celebrating the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. The author's birthday was June 3rd. and or so it was June 4th, and I had an Asylum 13 Ogre, which was it's a green and brown candy cane wrapped up, but it's called an ogre. I mean, if I could find a troll or a goblin, I mean, if I could be punny, and I hate puns. If I could be punny with my cigar during the game, that'd be great.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Pipes are probably easier. Do you know there is a line of pipe tobacco that's named after Lord of the Rings character, like Old Toby's tobacco and stuff like that?
I did not know that, but that makes perfect sense. And as a lapsed pipe smoker, I think I need to try some of that.
I after the show, I'll look into it and I'll give you the information.
Absolutely. I think that one my wife wouldn't mind me smoking.
Depends on where you're at. I mean, up here in Illinois, things that you can smoke during game are a little bit more interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah, we haven't quite gotten that far in Tennessee yet. That's still
Oh, you guys just turned what 21 a couple years ago? Because when I was living down there, your beer could not be in the same store. You had to actually go to a beer shop.
mhm.
Where up here, the beer, wine, and liquor is all in the same store. I'm like,
Yep.
oh, and they're like, Tennessee just passed a law that grocery stores can now carry beer. I'm like, really?
Hmm. Yeah, and in North Carolina, where I'm from, it's even worse because you have to have state-run ABC stores for liquor. So there's beer and wine in the grocery store, but liquor can only be sold by ABC stores.
I've been to one of those down in Florida,
Hmm.
and I thought it was kind of weird, but to each their own.
Yep. And here in chat, Brian James, how do you feel about turducken? Too many things have been shoved up too many other things' butts. That's how I feel about turducken.
I was asked to make one of those this past Thanksgiving by a client's nephew, and I told the nephew, "Go talk to your uncle because he's paying me to make one thing, not the other, and I don't want to get fired at the end of the day."
Hmm.
And it's not that bad. I mean, it's a lot of deboning, a lot of prep work,
Yeah.
but going back to role playing, a lot of good role playing as well on prep work on a DM's part.
Yep. And then Mark Genre Mixer, an exploding cigar. Only if you're playing top secret and you're killing Castro. Then you can have an exploding cigar.
Yeah, yeah, I know Mark. Mark is a partner in crime with me on my Sunday review show that I do on Sundays. We talk about different movies and books that are sometimes I like to lean onto fantasy and sci-fi to keep it into the realm. It's like, how could we turn this into a game or a story for a game? But it kind of goes everywhere. But I kind of like live chats that go everywhere because I think they're fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I didn't mean for there to be another culinary question here, but this just occurred to me. And it's something we were actually talking about not too long ago in the Basic Experts Gilded server. Another aspect of cooking is taking ingredients that are otherwise unpalatable, mixing them with other ingredients, and making something delicious. And I've seen this applied to comedy as well, in that, harsh subjects that are difficult to joke about, like, death, assault, whatever kind of dark, taboo subject it is. Saying that is funny is almost like saying flour is food. It's technically true in that it's an element of
You mean like ground flour, not like flowers. Like
right. Yeah.
my ex-wife has a garden of edible flowers,
Hmm.
and instead of flowers, I make bread with.
Yep.
Yeah,
But in applying that to RPGs, there are elements that can be harsh in these stories of, fantasy, sci-fi, even superheroes, and the way that it's presented, the way that it's packaged within the story almost determines whether or not that idea becomes palatable and something that players react to or something that players bounce off of, in my opinion at least. What are your thoughts on that?
I think humor's humor.
Yeah.
I think that all jokes, all words as a whole are innocent, but it's the person behind who's making the joke or saying these words that you gotta be concerned with.
Hmm.
Um, I can make jokes about the Irish. I am Irish. You know, I can make jokes until I'm blue in the face. But if I cross the street, make a hypothetical, let's say a Jewish joke, it's kind of off brand right now because everybody's really sensitive about everything.
Hmm.
It's not like it was. I'm 39 years old. I grew up with comedians. Was it Eddie Murphy, Billy Connolly, and just like them, where nothing was completely off the table. Well,
Hmm.
George Carlton, there was a lot of things that were probably should not been said. I mean, his whole seven things you can't say on TV turned into a Supreme Court case for the radio.
Yep.
I so when it comes to humor, I think all humor is good. It just really depends on the time and the place.
Hmm.
Before we started this, I told you my daughter told me a joke that was incredibly inappropriate, but I still thought it was funny.
Hmm.
And the person checking out, selling us our what we're buying, thought it was hilarious. So I mean, it was kind of a weird go. So when it goes into RPG and you're at a table, if you're a home table, you're normally inviting people that you know.
Yep.
People are enough like-minded to yourself where your dark humor is somewhat shared.
Hmm.
At a table that's ran in a shop, humor is questionable. Yes, you want to make sure everybody has a good time, but the jokes that you tell privately with your friends are not the same jokes you could tell at work.
Yeah. Yeah, and again,
And
it's a question of knowing your audience. If you're again, not to labor the cooking analogy too much, but if you know that uh, your friends that you're cooking for at home have particular tastes, you can get away with certain things, or trying kind of weird off the wall ideas that I've never tried cooking Polish food before. Let's try it tonight. And is everyone game for that? But
I
if you Oh,
I
sorry, go
have
ahead.
a pasta recipe that calls for squid ink.
Yeah.
Now, there's going to be a few people that are going to be turned off by the concept that it's squid ink, but if I tell you it's drow ink, everybody's going to giggle. It's just how you present it. That's all it really is just how you present it. I mean, we got Victor in the chat, and I say, "How about no, you crazy Dutch bastard?" And he laughs because he knows I don't mean anything offensive by it.
Hmm.
If he calls me a dirty eating potato Mick, he's right. My
Hmm.
favorite curse word as a kid for was bastard because it was true.
Yep.
I am a bastard, but I'm happy to be a bastard. And so because life is not supposed to be taken serious. Life is miserable enough. Your food nor your gaming should be.
Hmm. Crafty, you should unleash some of that sometime. I mean, I don't think anything that you've said in the Gilded server has eclipsed any of my kind of worst takes or worst jokes that I've made. So I might challenge you on that, Crafty.
I mean, not everybody is kosher
It's
with
true.
dark humor.
Yeah.
And I think it takes a certain type of person to be okay with dark humor. I mean, before I had kids, I knew a couple rough dead baby jokes. I still know them. I just don't tell them. Well, that's not true. I do tell them, but with different companies I share with now.
Yeah.
So it's time and place.
Hmm. Absolutely. Now, moving back into kind of the realm of professional DMing, I do have to ask, how did you find yourself with that particular role? Like, how did you fall into GMing professionally?
Well, the shop I was going to was kind of a more of a Warhammer 40K game shop. That was Magic the Gathering, and 40K was what they kept the doors open.
Yeah.
I wanted to play Pathfinder. and they had a DM already in there, and he rage quit for whatever reason. He just rage quit, and the owner of the place is like, "Hey, any of you guys be interested in doing this? Doing what? Running a campaign? Sure, I'll run it." He's like, "All right, I pay this guy this much money, so I'll pay you the same." Wait, what? I'm getting paid to be, to be a goofball? Sold. And it just fell into my lap.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got started, and I did it there for a couple of years before I moved back to Illinois.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the game shop that I grew up going to, Parker Banner, Kent and Wayne in Cornelius, North Carolina. If anyone wants to go to the coolest game shop in North Carolina, that's the place you'll go. Is Parker Banner, Kent and Wayne in Cornelius, North Carolina. It was the same way. It still is the same way. Magic kept the doors open. 40K was huge there. Very small contingent of like role players.
Oh, I talked to a local game shop owner that I respect immensely. If you're anywhere near the Peoria, Illinois area, it's called Just for Fun. The guy's been open forever. And I asked him what keeps doors open.
Mm-hmm.
And in line, it was Magic the Gathering, 5th edition, and everything else. And it's just nature of the shops. Like it or hate it, these games sell.
Yep.
And if you're in the business of selling games, you're going to want the hottest thing on the market, even if it's gone, sideways.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of times, I feel like Max especially kind of like pushes this on you every time. Pretty much every time you're on Friday Night Chill Stream, Max says something to this effect. But when it comes to actually having, whether you want to call it creative freedom, freedom of expression, freedom to put the players into kind of, whatever situation you come up with or the module presents, how do you feel like that plays out as a professional versus someone just at a home game?
That's a good question. I think the people that show up at my games want to be there. I have hard limits that are not that are not joked about at the table. That are not played in. I do not do adult themed games.
Right.
Even with the adults, I still keep it, in the rough PG-13 area of rating, but it never goes past that. I think freedom expression is awesome. I love the arts. I go up to Chicago, Illinois, at least every few years ago to the art museum. I appreciate art, and this is really what storytelling is. It is a form of art, but there still should be rules. There should be guidelines and hard limits to art, because as much as it is fun to, let's say, open a old Playboy because they don't make those anymore, if it seems like anymore.
Yeah.
There's a time and a place for it, various to a comic book, which is I will still argue is art. So gaming is the same way. You could have the freedom of telling the story, but you need boundaries with the people that you're playing with. I have one table that is for kids from 10 to 13. The next one is 13 to 16. Another one from 16 to 18. Then I got the grown-ups table.
Yeah.
I can tell the same story in each one of these groups, but how I tell it has to be catered to said group.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And so freedom is an amazing thing. The concept of being creatively freedom is awesome, and I highly recommend it for all DMs or all authors or painters or whatever your thing is. But we do still live in a society that says, no, this is not doable. We do not want this. And right or wrong, we're all stuck in that society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a question of when and where to push the boundaries. There are some boundaries that you can get away with pushing. There are some boundaries that people will just immediately try to burn you at the stake for pushing. And again, it all comes down to knowing your audience and knowing what you can get away with, and also knowing what's worth getting away with. Because sometimes it's just not worth it. Sometimes it doesn't even, what you are trying to do in that situation by pushing that particular envelope doesn't even make sense. You're just kind of being edgy to be edgy. And it should always be in service of something greater than just getting the reaction from people's faces. It should be in greater service to moving the story along, the plot along, creating a new complication for your players, something that enhances the game experience.
It's DM's responsibility to make sure the game continues.
Yeah.
If you think you're going a step too far, then you probably are, and you have to trust that your gut that it might not be the right thing for your party.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, on Table Breakers this past month, for I did a one shot where I kind of had the Krampus kidnapped children who was working for Baba Yaga, who turned the children that they kidnapped into pies that the parties did not know about, and some of the party members ate said pies. Now, would I do that for and then all the people on Table Breaker are grown ass men. Would
Mm-hmm.
I do that for a children's game or a young teenager's game?
No.
No, it'd most likely be kidnapping of Santa Claus or some more age appropriate subject.
Yeah.
But for grown-ups, as long as everybody is willing to as long as everybody has a good sense of humor and knows at the end of the day it's a game. This is not real life. This is not therapy. It's a game that we all agree to sit down at a table and share this experience together. Then I say, play it the way you want to, but keep in mind people's feelings do get hurt for some stupid reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
Does that
absolutely.
answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
I feel like that was kind of wordy.
All good. Don't worry about it. Now, another concern that people have when it comes to being a professional game master is this feeling, and this even happens with a lot of 5th edition GMs who aren't professionals. They're just running for their friends. A lot of GMs in the modern world of ours feel like they're service providers and feel almost like their players treat them like they're the cashier at McDonald's or something like that. Have you ever had an experience where you felt like that with your
Oh yeah,
players?
oh yeah, especially for the kids. I'm the babysitter for like 3 or 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the guy that the parents has to watch these kids while their parents are off doing errands or whatever else. But I took it upon myself to be this DM. I went looking for this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there is a little bit of it in 5th edition. But people are people. I mean, kids are assholes. I mean, I should know. I was one. Still am an asshole. But at the end of the day, when they walk out of the shop saying, "Mom, I had a great time. Can we please come back next week?" Or, leave a compliment or say, "Hey, I had a great game." As much as it might rub you during it while it's happening, the end result is said child or said person is having a good experience and they're willing to come back. And as a professional DM, that's high marks. I mean, you can always somewhat count on your friends to fill up the seats at your house.
Mm-hmm.
Having somebody willing to pay X amount of money to sit at a table where sometimes they know everybody and other times they don't know anybody and have a good time, that's the trick, at least in my point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you can... I'm not as opposed to the idea of a professional game master as some of the more traditional-minded players are out there, because, I think if someone's willing to pay the money, why not provide the service? But there is an art to pulling together a group of strangers, a group of people who you otherwise don't know each other, otherwise don't interact with each other, and getting them to engage with something that you've created or something that you're facilitating. It's something that not a lot of people can do. And so being able to get those return customers to your table based on your ability to deliver, that is something to be commended.
It's a pain in the ass. I'm not gonna say it. It's a pain in the ass, but it's worth it because these kids are going home and telling stories to their friends, and they sometimes bring their friends to the shop to try it out. We want our game. We want this game, this RPG world of ours, to look a certain way. We don't like the way that there's no good D&D after second edition. There's no a good D&D after 3.5. Wizard of the Coast was crazy for dropping out fifth edition. As much as that might be true, if you want to keep any variation of this hobby alive, you're going to have to somewhat cater to a younger generation. Sometimes make it a little bit more cartoon-ish. Saturday morning cartoons are no longer a thing. They got taken off the air a couple of years ago. So if I'm basically Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck to a kid for X amount of hours, but they keep coming back every time to have a good time, then it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to the grown-ups, I don't offer beer or alcohol, so why they keep showing up, I have no damn idea.
It's interesting that you mentioned Saturday morning cartoons because I also feel like the children's entertainment out there today isn't at all near kind of the quality that it was when I was a kid or even before I was a kid, where instead of instead of talking down to the audience, the entertainment talked directly to the audience. So yeah, you can be Bugs Bunny, but you can also be Batman the Animated Series. You could also be
Oh yeah.
Gargoyles. You can
Well,
challenge kids and give them something that engages them or something that really that they can laugh at it, but they could also think, oh man, that was awesome. Those are equal experiences in my mind. And so if some of you who want to run games professionally or running games for kids, you might find more success kind of being Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck for your younger tables, but some of you might really find success if you want to go for that X-Men, Spider-Man, Batman the Animated Series type feel, and I think that's missing from a lot of children's entertainment. So you might be aiming for that. I know it's a lofty height, but if you aim for that, you might be providing something they've never experienced before.
oh, I don't know if you remember. I don't actually know how old you are. I can only I'm imagining you're somewhere in your 30s.
I am 27.
Boy, was I off. Good thing I didn't place a bet on that
All
nonsense.
good.
So when I was a kid, there was cartoons like He-Man and G.I. Joe and Thundercats.
Mm-hmm.
And well, with He-Man and G.I. Joe, even the Ninja Turtles, now that I think about it, would at the very end of the cartoon, they for a few seconds they would talk about the morality of the story that they told,
Mm-hmm.
about doing the right thing, about making friends, being good to your friends, and things like that, being good to your parents. If you can somewhat slide that into a campaign, especially with kids, I think that they're going home with something a little bit more than I rolled dice for 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And me being morality driven is just weird for me because I'm like, hey, let's go watch Revenge of the Nerds. I'll explain what that joke means when you're a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it is. I mean, if you look at a kid, kids are not dumb. As much as we want to think they are, they're not. And you're right. Batman, X-Men, Gargoyles, even Pee Wee Herman back in the day understood this,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why they were popular. Now, Pee Wee Herman is a whole different subject, but still, he had the same formula when he did his show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, what's interesting about those morality segments at the end of the cartoons was they put those in there so that they could sell toys. But
Well, they were 30-minute commercials. I mean, I'm not going to say that they're not.
mm-hmm.
And if fifth edition or WotC gets their way, 4 hour gaming sessions will be one great big commercial, monetizing and everything else, which I get and I disagree with all at the same time.
Yep. Yeah, and I guess now is as good a time as any to transition into talking about this OGL thing, and I want to start by kind of staying where we are with the professional GM stuff, um, with what the OGL 1.1 is saying, it sounds to me like the stuff that's going on at your shop where the owner is paying you to run 5th edition. It sounds like WotC is now going to either tell you to stop or tell you to pay up. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts on that?
I don't know how that's going to work out. I mean, if they do what they want to do, I think my interaction with the kids are going to be a whole lot more scripted than they are now,
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to want to run with a I don't want to say agenda. Maybe agenda is the right word for it, unfortunately. And there's going to be comments and jokes that are no longer fits their image, and I'm going to have to cater to that, which I think is complete and utter bullshit. I think the best DMs, best storytellers are the ones that are not on a collar, and they might put me out to try to put professional DMs on a collar of some sort. I don't care. I don't mind running their stories if the, for one shot stories with Adventure League does it or Society does it where they have one shot storylines as long as they're good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really into home brewing. It's not that I'm bad at it, it's just not really my bag. I rather run modules. But as long as your modules are good, I don't mind running it. And unfortunately, with Paizo, some of their best modules were third party.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know so much with 3.5, but even in 5th edition, I came across several modules that were 3rd editions were far better than the crap they've been pumping out.
Yeah.
I mean, Victor just pumped out, did was it a Kickstarter for his book that for 5e that put modern take to it. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's absolutely awesome. If WotC wants to get rid of that, then they're just shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, there's nothing good is going to come out of this. I jokingly said earlier when I have to change my name from Cigar DM to Cigar GM, that's going to be bullshit. It's a title that I've worked for. It's a title I earned, but because I don't follow the company line, I can no longer use it.
Mm-hmm.
Or do I have to now pay a monthly subscription to be able to use the DM? For $20 a month, you get to use such and such. That's bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is all why. I mean, those of you who follow me on Twitter, this is why I started going off yesterday and today, and that's what this hashtag RP Gorillas is all about. Um, WotC has essentially, with this OGL 1.1, said not only do they own D&D, they very well think that they own the entire hobby of role-playing games. And it seems to me that with your specific situation, what WotC is going to end up doing is going to these shops that have professional GMs and saying, hey, at your shop, if you're running 5th edition, or if you're running 6th edition, I guess, if we're talking about the new one, if you're going to be running our games, you're using Adventurers League, you're using Adventurers League adventures, you have to follow, the letter of everything going on with Adventurers League. And if we find out that you're not, and we find out that you're making money off of, running something outside of these parameters using our rule system, we're going to send you a C&D or we're going to take you to court. That's what I see happening with, play in shops moving forward.
There's a really weird loophole to this one, and I haven't quite completely worked it out in my head on if it comes down that way. But there are certain things that they can't copyright.
Mm-hmm.
They can't copyright the D20 dice system if you use D20 or not. They can't copyright certain terms. I might not be able to say fighter, but maybe I could say warrior. Maybe instead of wizard, I can say another term or whatever. There's going to be an interesting workaround, and anybody who's clever enough to pull it off is willing to give Watsy the middle finger. More power to you. And it will make DMs like me, they'll have to do more homebrew, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not one of my favorite ways to do it.
And what I want to do and what I want to see other people do, I'm going to be contributing to this. 2023, I'm hoping by the end of the year, I'll be able to at least have, a crowdfunding campaign, if not something published. I want to give people who don't want to play in the WotC sandbox anymore that published material. So, like Nighthaven. Nighthaven is not a rules system. It's not its own set of rules, but it's a setting. And it'll have adventures with it. That's what I'm looking to publish. That's what I'm looking to put out there. So, again, to use your shop as an example, if the owner doesn't want to play in the WotC sandbox, but still wants to hire you to, let's say, run Castles and Crusades, which might not be as financially wise as sticking with the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
Right.
But hypothetically, he wants you to run Castles and Crusades. You'll have Nighthaven at your disposal to run using that rule set. And I'm hoping to give that those options to people and letting them know, hey, this will be outside the ecosystem. You guys are not going to be supporting some giant corporation that just wants to milk you for all of your nickels and dimes. You're supporting independent creators.
I have this odd feeling the person who's pressing the issue with the OGL doesn't quite, or might have played the game once or twice, but he's not one of us. He is some guy who realizing as long as this is a thing, you guys are leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
And this business, I mean, it's a business. It's a corporation. They have stock owners. They have stock owners. They have employees. Yes, they need to keep their own lights on. I just think this is a horrible, horrible way to do it, and you're going to end up losing at least a couple generations of gamers, old school gamers, from my friend Finn, who has been playing for like 40 years. Shadow and Son's been playing forever too. And, I mean, he's not a fan of the current edition or last couple of editions from my understanding. But all you're going to do is give the hobby a black eye because there's a few pennies and quarters left on the table.
Yeah, and I won't even be generous enough to say that this is someone who has played the game even once. This is an old suit from Hasbro. It's the same thing that happened in Marvel Comics in the mid-'90s when Ron Perelman bought the company. There's someone in a business suit taking a look at the numbers and saying, why are these other people allowed to publish material for our game that we're not seeing any cut of? Why are we letting people, play in our sandbox without giving us a cut? It's the same thing that Marvel tried to do when they were like, why are these other shops, selling product next to ours? Why aren't we able to, push sole distribution through a platform that we own? Why can't we own every aspect of creation, from cradle to grave?
Right.
And what happened with Marvel was Marvel went out, or not out of business, but they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1996. I think...
Yeah. It's funny how Marvel is the whole corporation business outside of even this is just funny. Spider-Man, Spider-Man, not the Tobey Maguire, not the latest one, and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies are doing really good. We're doing well. The two that were made, well, the first one did well. The second one I thought it was good, but anyways, Sony's like, well, we're going to make these movies, and Marvel's like, we kind of want Spider-Man back. Well, we have a contract saying we own Spider-Man. That's cool. We just won't make any toys or comic books for the Spider-Man. And I don't know if that's completely accurate, but I don't remember seeing any Andrew Garfield Spider-Man toys out there for the most part.
No. No, there was almost nothing. It's
Yeah.
yeah,
DC called a little bit of nerd history. DC at one point, I think it was in the late '70s, called Marvel and says, "We're going bankrupt. Do you want to buy our stuff?"
yeah. Yeah, people forget about that, but DC had, they called it the DC explosion, where they put out a whole bunch of books in the market trying to raise revenue, and they ended up oversaturating the market. And there was almost a deal put in place right before Crisis on Infinite Earths was released in 1985 that would have seen Marvel publishing Batman, Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, Teen Titans, and Justice League, essentially the same way that they made comics for Star Wars and G.I. Joe. They would have been like licensed properties.
Right. It's funny. I think there's been a few of them, but Conan. I'm using Conan as an example because it's the truth. But Conan has bounced from DC to Marvel, and to independent comic book people. I don't know where he's sitting right now, but I have a comic book in my collection where Conan was hanging out with Wolverine, and I have another one where he's hanging out with someone in DC. I don't remember who. Even Tarzan has ran into the same theory. He is bounced from one comic book company to the other because they buy the rights and they realize that we're not the right fit, or the family says no. However, it works out. But yeah, cross contamination, as a couple of my friends would put it, when it comes to the comic books. If we can't make it, we'll just sell it to somebody else, and hopefully they'll treat our characters with love. I mean, they all can't be Howard the Duck, I guess.
Now, Crafty makes a good point in chat here. The vice president of Hasbro is a guy named Nicholas Mitchell, and he apparently has 25 years of IP law experience. And it sounds to me like this guy has essentially led an initiative saying, this is our IP. We're leaving a lot on the table. We're not enforcing a lot. So, we need to nip this in the bud right now.
Yeah, I've been reading the chat. He has an earlier statement. The person pushing the new OGL has been a lawyer since the 90s. He's a lawyer. He's not a dumb guy. He knows exactly what he's doing. I have no doubt that he knows exactly what he is doing. I just don't think he has the foresight to see what he's going to do to the hobby, or if he even cares at all.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, this feels like a short-sighted business decision to me. This feels like someone trying to bring in as much money as they possibly can, but what they're going to end up doing is losing money because, they're driving away a lot of customers who want to use that third-party stuff, and ultimately they're angering people. They're making people mad. By doing this, they're making creators mad. They're making people who otherwise might have bought 6th edition books angry, and ensuring that they're not going to spend their money with WotC ever again. And the result of this is always the same. Whenever a company tries to put a stranglehold on an entire industry by being ultra litigious, they never win. It's usually just a matter of time before they find themselves kind of out on the street. It happened with TSR. It's going to end up happening again with Hasbro. This is not new. This is something that's been done before, and it was a failure then. It'll be a failure now.
I get why WotC had to be bought by somebody. And a toy company does, as a toy company for the most part, it makes sense. It made a lot of sense in a roundabout way. It's just a bunch of mishandling. It is very much a lot of mishandling. And I think you're right. I think somebody's going to end up replacing him. Somebody's going to get fired. I don't know what year it was, but Nike was going to release a shoe in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day called the Black and Tan, not looking into the Irish history. And I know shoe companies and WotC are two different creatures, but it's almost the same story. They're doing something incredibly dumb, thinking it's a good idea. Now, if they want to monetize D&D, that there's several ways to do it where it's not completely cringe. Like, what was the magazine Cobalt magazine back in the day?
Hmm.
Uh, if they had, a monthly subscription to different thought processing, different stories, different like what Cobalt was, but under the same under their flagship, I'd pay $20 a month for a magazine to help me prove my DMing game if it was worth reading.
Hmm.
But I don't think that's going to be the way it is. I think it's going. I really hope it doesn't. I see it be turning into the next World of Warcraft,
Yeah.
instead of being actually at a physical table.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's. I think honestly, this is going to be the hill where as a service dies. Not. I think as a service is just kind of with us as an economic concept. That's not going away. But when you apply it to something like tabletop gaming, where so much happens up here, there's so much that's intangible. There's a lot of factors you just can't control about role playing games. And so if you try to push that idea that you don't own the books, you don't own the story, you don't own anything, we own it, you're using it for a fee. If you try to push that too hard, people are just going to retreat from it and they're going to go back to the basics, which is pen and paper, dice in your mind. And
Now, I have a physical book.
mm-hmm.
That's fine. A physical book. If they want to come back here and buy the rest of my collection, I'd probably burn it. They're not taking this away from me. I can run out of this book and the other books I have until I die of alcoholism, most likely, or whatever else comes first. But to all the newer stuff, we as gamers, DMs, or GMs, or whatever, have the ability of just saying, no, we are not going to buy your stuff. We're not going to buy that book. Every third guy I know has a 3D printer. They can make their own uh, play mats, their own figs, whatever. So it's going to be a matter of when do we say that's enough? We're not going to take it anymore. And I think it's going to be. I think you're right. I think it's going to be within maybe the next year or so. I think it's going to be a whole lot sooner than later.
Yep. Yeah, and already we're seeing big players kind of stand up to WotC on this. Um, Crafty points this out. Kobold Press and it looks like Matt Colville as well have both kind of come out against this new OGL. So the Kobold Press is not a small player when it comes to third party D&D compatible stuff. So you know them saying we're not going to deal with this, we're not going to take this, that's going to cause some problems because if they're not going to deal with it, then who else is not going to deal with it? I think if Kobold Press is willing to go their own way, I think most of the major third-party publishers, be they, Frog God or whoever is still in the market out there, they're not going to want to play in that sandbox either. And the big one is going to be what happens to Critical Role. I know I don't like Critical Role. I know a lot of people don't like Critical Role, but
I like their cartoon that's on Amazon. It makes me giggle.
mm-hmm. Like at
No,
this point, it's gonna be Critical Role, and even like based on some of the terms in the OGL, the way that Stranger Things currently portrays D&D violates the new OGL 1.1 unless they want to give money to WotC. So, if they're gonna push back, Netflix and the Duffer Brothers production company pushing back on WotC and Critical Role pushing back on WotC will be, that'll be the end of it. However, as Crafty points out here, both Paizo and Critical Role have been very quiet, and so it's entirely possible,
yeah,
if not likely, they've cut deals.
yeah. I see a NDA. Oh, Netflix. Netflix, as of right now, does not have. I mean, they're making money. I'm not saying that they're not making money, but they went from a streaming network that says loving is sharing when it came to your password to don't share. They're losing money.
Yeah.
I mean, they've had a couple black eyes this past year. Witcher being one of them, with the lead guy saying, "No, you guys are going in a direction that's not right for the character, not for the story." So I quit.
Mhm.
And he was what made Witcher. I mean, I'm not saying it's a great show or anything, but he's the one who was making it feasible.
Yeah.
And so they hired Thor's younger brother,
Liam Hemsworth.
Ian.
Yeah.
Yeah, who is. And so, all right, you shit the bed. Congratulations.
Hmm.
Now, do you want to get in a fight with Hasbro over how Stranger Things plays D&D? They're not. They're gonna be quiet, if they didn't already strike a deal.
Hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if they have struck a deal with WotC, or if they're just saying, uh, basically, there's just not going to be any D&D in the next season of Stranger Things. I I could see them kind of moving past it as well. Um,
I
but yeah,
hear a
I
very
mean,
unhappy baby.
say what?
I hear a very unhappy baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh no, no shade. I do miss those days. Weirdly enough.
Hmm.
Um, it is their last season. I mean, they made the big bad to be a historically legendary villain in D&D. And they're definitely going in that direction. They're supposedly going in a direction, and I think they just got done filming that long ago. I like the show. I like the show because it's what I remember from the '80s. I remember a lot of they're doing the '80s well, and just the era aspect of the story. It's like every other story about teenagers out there. Oh no, there's a big bad, and we have to be the Scooby Doo's, the Scooby Bunch. Um, it might be the last show it does this. I mean, there's also Hasbro has a D&D movie coming out that I actually do plan on seeing. Even just to poke fun of it, I'll go watch it because I'm bored most of the time.
Hmm.
But it's how much. Well, Mark, I'm reading chat as I'm trying to talk. It's how much of their noses they're going to cut off to spite their face is what I'm curious about. Mark obviously doesn't care about the RPG. They want brand D&D in movies, toys, and clothing, and stuff like that. I can't even argue that. I have the D&D cookbook. I collect weird cookbooks. I have the Hannibal Lecter from the Hannibal Lecter TV series cookbook just because it's Hannibal Lecter cookbook. And if you don't know who Hannibal Lecter is, I don't know what to tell you guys in chat.
Yeah, I mean, they very much. It's the same way that Disney treats Marvel comics. They don't care about the comics. WotC or Hasbro doesn't care about the game. They just care about the brand. They care about the D, the ampersand, and the D. Um, but again, I don't see success for that D&D movie. And I know today they just announced, a D&D show is coming to Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus sucks, with the exception of Yellowstone and the other Taylor Sheridan shows. Paramount Plus is the worst streaming service. So just adding D&D to that.
There's a lot of shows that they're on CBS. I like the Tom Selleck, uh, Blue Bloods, the cop show. I enjoy that one. But yeah, I agree. As a streaming network, they don't even have Yellowstone. I don't think they might be getting they get the spin-offs with the newest one with Harrison Ford and the other one with Tim McGraw and his wife Faith Hill, and they're getting the another spin-off called 666, which is an actual working ranch down in Texas. But as a whole, yeah, I mean they dropped the ball with Halo. They dropped the ball with a couple other things. So I agree.
Hmm.
Oh,
The
they also have Classroom Westerns. I like Classroom Westerns, so
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I should check
uh,
those out on there because I do like classic
yeah,
westerns.
I got Disney Plus, and I'm like watching old school cartoons I remember growing up as, so I can't say much.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, honestly, even with the D&D show, it's in development. There's a lot of things that have died in development, and if that movie flops in March, which I am pretty sure it's gonna flop, there won't be a D&D show. So
It can't be any worse than the last two D&D movies we got. The first one was complete utter joke. They just slapped D&D on a buddy cop type theme movie. Granted, they weren't cops, but you get where I'm going. The second one didn't even make it to theater. It was straight to release, and it was actually halfway decent. So this one has the names, it has the CGI to back up the scenery. It'll be what it'll be. Do I expect it to, make the same money as um, Wakanda Forever or the Space Cats that really Polynesians? No. But it's going to make some money.
I mean, it'll make a little bit, but it's not going to set the world on fire because it's an also ran at this point. We've seen other franchises try to be the MCU. We've seen Men in Black try and fail to be the MCU. We've seen Terminator try and fail to be the MCU. Only Marvel has been able to pull off making Marvel movies, and everyone else that has tried has found that they don't have what Marvel had in the early days to get people invested. So, at this point, they're just kind of essentially children playing pretend at what they've seen adults do. There's no real creativity behind it, and I think audiences do see that when these other franchises try to pull a Marvel. And I don't see it being any more successful for D&D, especially just because that movie looks like it was written by an AI.
It very well be. See, the thing with Marvel, and this can actually branch back down to storytelling just for, campaign D&D or Pathfinder already running. Yes, we know we made some bad movies, but we didn't cut the strings and ran. We just kept on moving forwards. Where DC Comics, they cut the string so many times. No, we don't. It failed, so we're gonna go a different direction. If you just stay at the course, even if you have a bad session, doesn't mean your next session is gonna be bad. And it's just the stay tunedness that Marvel has. Yes, their agenda has gone very woke. I'm not gonna say that it hasn't. Well, I still watch the movies with my kid. I got an 11-year-old daughter who loves the Marvel movies. And these movies are not meant, most of the movies, well, even 5th edition wasn't meant for us. 5th edition was meant for kids. If you really look at it. You have a bunch of older players saying, well, this is not what it was like when we were that age. Of course it's not, because it wasn't made for us. It's the same argument with Star Wars. The second trilogy and the last trilogy wasn't meant for the first batch of people who saw it. George Lucas said that. It was meant for the next generation of people who watch, if not play, the game. It's everything changes for better or for worse. I'm not saying the changes now are for better. I think they suck all the way around.
There's a lot of things that are made for children that are really good, and there's a lot of things that are made for children that are absolutely terrible. Made for kids or made for another generation, or it's not for you, doesn't excuse bad content.
It doesn't. The cartoons have dumbed down. The cartoons that you find today have definitely dumbed down. D&D should not be that way. Pathfinder should not be that, and so forth and so on should not be that way. Look at our attention span as the younger generation's attention span. They're more attached to this than they are to anything that's being played on a table. I mean, I don't know how it was with most kids, but the idea of I do. One of my friends has a kid roughly the same age as mine. And the idea of them sitting down and trying to play Monopoly is pulling their hair because the kid is up and running around. I my daughter will play Monopoly with me
Hmm.
because she understands the idea of patience. And these games are not meant for patience. They're meant to be fast, and that's where they're losing it.
Well, and that's the other thing. People talk a lot about uh, young people's attention spans and how they're more focused on the phone than anything else. Young minds are also pliable, though. So the younger generation is focused on this because this is
Yep.
all that they know and this is all that they're given because this is easy. If someone is going to take the time to sit them down to do the work to really push them consistently to alter their attention span, especially at 10, 11, 12 years old, at that point, you can alter what a kid's attention span is because it's not too late. Even if they're, 15, 16 years old, it's not too late to change someone's attention span. It just takes time and effort. And unfortunately, effort is a bad word these days.
It's not. I'm not blaming the parents because the world that we live in right now is not the one we grew up in, where the idea that you could at least have one parent at home to, teach kids patience and things like that. Now it's everybody has to work, and we're dumping our kids off at daycares or wherever where the people who are working in daycares are overwhelmed. And they shoved them in front of a TV that is going 30, maybe 3 or 4 minutes per episode before the next commercial, the cartoon before the next commercial. If you want kids to sit down and do something with them, you need to give them the attention they deserve. And if you want your players at the table, I'm circling back. I really am. I know I can go out in the weeds. If you want your players to be consistently at the table and paying attention at the table, you're going to have to not cater, but you're going to have to make sure that you're giving them as much attention as you want them to give you.
Yeah. Yeah. And they have to feel like they are engaged and they're involved in what's going on. And to appeal to that kind of attention span that's hammered into kids these days, you can present them with multiple different changes and things moving at a fast pace in the game, but ultimately what you're doing is the same activity for an extended period of time. So there are ways to kind of hack that mindset. It's just, again, it takes effort, it takes time, it takes someone willing to actually sit down and engage these kids. And it sounds like at your table, that's what you end up doing, professionally, is you're dealing with kids who, for the most part, are watching, endless loops of TikToks on their phones. But for, a few hours a week, you're able to get them engaged in one story at one table for a few hours. And that's more time they spend on one activity than they spend on probably almost any other activity.
It doesn't matter if they're a kid or adult. I have a basket, like a little Easter basket that sits outside the other door, and everybody puts their phone in, including me. I put my phone in it because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And if there's an emergency, I told the parents, please call the shop. Don't call your kids, call the shop because the shop, the kids are going to freak out because you're just giving them information right then and there. Give it to the shop owners, because the guy who runs the shop has, like, kid you not, like 11 kids. I mean, and and so he comes in, says, "Hey, Tommy, your mom's on your way. You guys have to leave early." It's just there's a way to handle it, and making grown-ups, kids, whoever, leave their phone outside the room. You separate them from that distraction. I don't know if it's a right idea, but it seems to work.
Yeah. And honestly, I think there needs to be more times where we leave our phones. I turn my phone off at night. I have a traditional alarm clock and I turn my phone off at night. My mom has gotten mad at me for doing that before because back in 2020 we had a tornado here in Nashville, and everyone wanted to know right that minute at 2 o'clock in the morning my time if I was okay. But I was okay. I was asleep.
Were
So
you there for the Great Flood?
I was not. No, that was That was some years before I moved to Nashville.
I was there for the Great Flood.
Hmm.
That was a rare treat that I never want to deal with it ever again. I was trapped at a friend's house because I was living up in Illinois, and we went down there for a camping event, and the rain came in on Thursday, and we were stuck there until like Tuesday.
Hmm.
So I get emergencies happen, and I really do. I I can't turn my phone off. I with my daughter because
Hmm.
as much as I have faith in my ex-wife of being a good mom, me and my daughter both agree that she's batshit crazy. So if my daughter is having a rough go with her mom, I'm there. I can pick up the phone. It's a separate household problem, not a not a a whole family problem.
Hmm. Yeah, but I mean, I honestly think the no phones at the table rule is a good one, and it's probably something I've been looking at my phone during the game as a GM and as a player because there's downtime. There's times where people are just taking too damn long to do what it is they want to do, and
Oh,
so you're just like, let's see what Twitter's got going on.
I have a horrible case of ADD, and if I'm not doing something, I am up walking around. If you want me to set your table, unfortunately, I have to keep my hands and me busy because I don't play spellcasters. I look at wizard as too much paperwork.
Mm.
In Bruce's campaign, I'm playing an archer. I roll my dice, I do my actions, I move on.
Mm.
That's it. And that's the type of player. It's not that I'm lazy. It's just it's my sticking to your strengths.
Mm.
Now, with other people like Jade, for example, who can play the spellcasters, he's got it down to a fine art. I'm not that guy. So if I know that about myself, I need to be understanding towards other people. But at the shop, there is routine. There is a way that things have to be done, and they're all my rules.
Yep.
And it provides a good game for my players and for me.
Mm. Yeah,
So
absolutely. So we are kind of running up against our time here. This has been a great conversation. I'm glad that we finally got to do this. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you, and we took things in several interesting directions here tonight. So I think people will really get some value out of this one.
I play in the weeds. Remember the cartoons when we were kids, the sing along cartoons with the bouncy ball?
Yeah.
Bounce,
Hmm.
dot, dot, dot. Unfortunately, with my ADD, it's dot, 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 dot in every other direction. But I want to thank you for having me on your show. I've been really looking forward to this one since we originally talked about it. And I love to have you on mine, even if even if it's a Sunday. It's a Sunday review where we do movies. It's like this coming Sunday, we're going to be talking about the Gremlins movies from the '80s,
Hmm.
the Christmas movie, and it's just something we do. But if we get back into gaming, I would love to have your endpoint on point with the other guys I have there. I have Mark. Mark's been in the chat, and like I said earlier, he's one of the guys that hangs out with me on Sundays. But once again, thank you for having me on your show.
Hmm. I mean, even if you just want to have me on for a movie episode at some point, I will tell you I am very knowledgeable on the movie Tombstone. It's my favorite movie of all time. And I am also willing to talk ad nauseum about how Die Hard and Raiders of the Lost Ark are perfect examples of what happens when you make an ability score check.
It's funny you bring up Tombstone. April, we're going to do Western movies.
Okay.
And I think I think we're doing Raiders of the Lost Ark this coming month for our Valentine special movies. We're not doing rom coms, but we're doing romantic ish action. Romancing the Stone, I think, was one of the titles that got thrown in there. So, yeah, I'd love to have you on there. If we do Tombstone, I'll definitely give you a shout out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before I let you go, there's one question that everyone gets asked on Rollin' Bones. You are no exception. So the answer can be as philosophical or sophomoric as you want it to be. But Conall, if you could put anything on a t-shirt, what would it be?
Shut up and smoke a cigar.
That works. That works. All right, well, guys, that is going to do it for tonight's episode of Rollin' Bones. Once again, Conall, thank you so much for coming on. Next week, y'all know him, you love him, you should be buying his books if you haven't already. But Levi Combs from Planet X Games is going to be back, and our topic for the show is not going to be one of his books, but rather parsing out the differences between weird fantasy and gonzo. This is going to be a very heady, very philosophical episode. On my part, there will probably be a lot of talk about Hunter S. Thompson because that's what I associate the word gonzo with. But that's what you can look forward to next week. So talking a lot about, probably some Elric, some Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, and definitely some Conan. Just kind of as we parse out the difference between weird fantasy and gonzo. So hope you guys will join me then. But until then, whether you rolled a 1 or a 20, I'm so glad that you rolled your bones with me, Ryan Howard, and please use the hashtag RPGorilla on Twitter, or RPGorillas. You can see it in the title of this episode. We want to show WotC that we mean business, and we want to show them that if they want a war, they got a war. So we're not an organized army. We are an insurgency. So RP Guerrillas. That's going to be us moving forward. So I'll see you guys next time.